Welcome to the Shift Podcast, Season 3. This is our Tuesday segment, one day at a time. I hope you are excited because I am. I'm actually going to start this segment off by actually telling a little bit about my story and my story with my amazing oldest son, Demario Bell Jr. Now, first, I want to say to the parents who have children or a child that may be battling with something to stay strong, stay courageous, and continue to trust God. Continue to allow yourself to have faith in God. It's worth it. A lot of times we don't understand why we are dealt what we are dealt. But I've learned from experience that sometimes the best thing you can do is stand and trust God. So I remember when I first was told by the doctors that my son is autistic. My son was about 2 years old and he wasn't saying anything. He wasn't saying mommy, he wasn't saying daddy. I didn't think anything was wrong. Like, I'm going to be honest. I was like, I got a good day. Okay. And I remember when the doctors first told me, I was not in agreement. It was very discouraging because no one wants to hear that their child may have development issues. No one wants to hear that their child may not be able to do what normal children do. And so it was very discouraging for me and it was very emotional for me. And I remember saying to the doctor, that cannot be the only option. No. And so I remember taking my son home and we began to work with our son, my son, on different things. One of the first things that I wanted my son to know was his name. During that time, my son was not responding to his name. At one point, he was, but by the time he turned 2, he was no longer responding to his name. And so we would say, Demario, Demario, nothing, absolutely nothing. And that was very discouraging, very emotional. If you can relate, let me know in the chat. So it was a lot of moments where I was like, God, why me? I don't understand why me. And during that time, it was why me because I was a virgin until I was 28 years old. And so I didn't understand. I was like, why me? You know? Um, and I remember one time the Lord spoke to me and the Lord was like, why not you? One of the things about me and my journey is I've always been a person of faith. Like if I could see it in my mind, I can have it. And so the Lord gave me revelation on that. The Lord began to reveal to me that He's allowed me to take my faith to another level and that I have the ability to stand for my son and fight. And also with the help of my mother, my mom during this journey has made sure that I didn't give up. My mom has made sure that I didn't throw in the towel. Sometimes you really do need someone in your corner that's going to remind you of the strength that you have, but also remind you that God provides strength. Sometimes you're going to need somebody in your corner that you can cry to and they pat you on the back, but then they tell you to get up. And for me, that's my mom. And so I want you to understand that if you don't have that person, then you definitely want to be a part of our community where you're able to be around people that's going to motivate you and push you and encourage you to fight. Because when you have a child, you are your child's hero. You are your children's hero. And it's so important that you remember that. It's so important that you understand that. It's so important that you stand for that. That's one of the things that my mom reminds me of, that I am my children's hero. So I have to fight for my children. And so I remember working with him on his name, spell your name, say your name, all these things, but he did not respond to his name. And I'm going to tell you, this is a very emotional journey, very emotional. I was married during the time, right? And so even though I was married, I felt like I was doing it by myself. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why his dad wasn't helping. I didn't understand none of those things. And so I'm pouring in, and my brother Jonathan is helping me during the process. And it's a journey. There were so many times I would go into my room or step aside, and tears would roll down my face because I did not understand why was this happening to my son? Why is it that I can't experience what it's like for a child to call you mommy? You know, if you can relate, let me know in the chat. I want you to understand that my mindset was, I have to give this everything I got, because even if it doesn't work, I will never be able to say I did not give it everything I got. I'm going to say that again. I made up in my mind that I was going to give it everything I got. And if it did not work, I would be okay because I gave it everything I got. So I made a decision to fight. And I want you to make a decision to fight. Your fight may look different from my fight. I felt like my son could defeat autism. During that time, my son was not talking. My son wasn't responding. He wasn't showing any emotion. He wasn't doing any of those things. But I made a decision that I wanted to fight. I remember when I got him in speech therapy because I believed, okay, you have a problem with social skills, so we're gonna put you in a whole lot of stuff. And so I got him in speech therapy, and then I turned around and got him in karate, right? I remember when I got him in speech therapy, during this time he started to say some words. And so the speech therapist would tell me every day, your son is not talking. You need to just diagnose him, right? And I was like, I can't do that. I can't do that. And I would say, he can talk. He's just not talking to you. Because during that time, my son had started talking, not fluent, but he was saying words, but he would say it to me. And so I would tell her, he's saying words to me so he can talk. And that's why I tell parents today, if you are dealing with a child on the spectrum for autism or have been diagnosed as autistic, but they can make a sound, I believe that they can talk. I believe that it may take work. I believe that you may have to cry and really endure, but I do believe that you will be able to talk. And I also believe that nothing happens by coincidence. So in college, I had a best friend from California, and I remember he told me he did not say a word until he was 4 years old. It took his grandmother coming from Georgia to California. And when his grandmother got there, his grandmother began to work with him, and he finally spoke, and he can talk perfectly fine. Okay. And he graduated from Fort Valley State University with me. So that memory, that conversation stuck with me during that particular time, all right, with my son. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to keep going. And that's the thing I love about God. God will put us in certain situations, allow us to meet certain people so that we can remember that for a certain moment or a certain time. Like we may not need it right now, but one day That conversation happened for a moment in your life. And we have to really understand that. So I was telling the speech therapist he can talk. He's just not talking to you. And so one day while we were home, I decided to record him. And so I recorded him talking. So we went to speech therapy and she said it to me again. And I said, I want to show you something. I pulled out my phone and I showed her my son talking. And her words to me was, you're right, he can talk. But I want you to consider getting him diagnosed. You will get financial benefits for that. When she said that to me, I looked at her and said, this is not about money. This is my son. I don't care about no money. I want my son to live the life that God chose and predestined for his life. And you know what I did that day? I took him out of speech therapy because that day I realized I don't want anyone working with my son that does not believe the way I believe. I need people connected to me and my son that believe that he's going to defeat autism. I don't care what the report says. I don't care what the stats say. I need people that know how to walk by faith and not by sight. I need people that can see it in their mind. So as a man thinketh, so is he. That's what I need. And I took him out of speech therapy. Now, I put him in karate, right? Because I wanted him to learn karate. I wanted him to get around people because I noticed that he wasn't social. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put you in karate. So I put him in karate. When I put him in karate, that was not easy. That was not easy at all. That was a battle. And I remember going to a karate match, and it was hundreds of people in the building. And for the first time, I saw anxiety consume my son. I saw my son act crazy and tears just began to roll down my face. I was very thankful and grateful that my mom came with me because I'm going to be honest, I wanted to leave. And my mom said, no, we're going to stay. We're going to stay. And when we got ready to do the different things, when he got ready to do the different things during the karate match, he needed help. And that was very discouraging. To be able to see that my son needed help with everything, but other kids his age could do it with no problem. Around this time, he had to be about 3 years old. I was so discouraged, y'all. All I could do was let the tears flow. And then after that, I'm pulling on you, I'm dragging you because you acting crazy. Discouraging. Okay. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, God, why me? If you can relate, put it in the chat. I'm like, God, why me? Why my son? You know? And I want you to understand that you are not alone. You are not alone at all. The journey of having a child on the spectrum for autism or anything is a journey and it is a process. Okay. And so I I realized that day the only way to defeat it is to keep doing it. I would have moments because I'm flesh. And so I would have moments where I was like, he embarrassing me. And I was like, it don't matter. It doesn't matter if people watching don't understand. I know what's going on. And so my mind was like, in order to defeat it, just like my mom said, he has to stay in it. He has to stay in it. And so I kept taking him around people. I kept feeling like I was getting embarrassed because that anxiety would kick in and he would start acting up, kicking, all of those things. And one day, my son could be around a lot of people and there was no anxiety. I want to encourage you to fight. I want to encourage you to take it one day at a time. I promise you, It is going to be worth it. Trust the process. Trust God. All right. So I remember when I got ready to put him in a private school because in my mind, um, putting him in a private school would be more beneficial, more hands on. It would help him. So I'm excited. Of course, I got to pay, right? And so I ended up putting him in a private school around this time. He had to be about 4 years old. And so put him in a private school. During this time, he still wasn't socializing. He wasn't really saying a lot of words. Okay. So I put him in a private school. Day two, they didn't even give me a week. Day two, I get a call. Can you come to the school? I come to the school. That lady sits me down and she says to me, we will reimburse you for what you paid, but we cannot help your son. I couldn't even hold the tears back. Tears just began to run down my face. And they were like, he's a sweet boy. He's so good. He's very well behaved, but he's not talking. That was so discouraging. The tears, I could not stop the tears. I was like, have you ever been in a place where you're like, I don't want to cry in front of people? If you're one of those people that don't like crying in front of people, and then when you end up crying in front of them, you're like, dang, like that was me. Like, dang. So I ended up crying. I was hurt. I was so hurt because I'm like, I just knew y'all was gonna be able to help my son. And I remember the lady told me, I don't want to waste your time, and I definitely don't want to waste his time. We've seen situations like this, and in the end, it did it didn't do them any good to stay. Now I was hurt, but then the lady came back and said, "But I did something for you. You don't have to do any research. I've sent referrals out already for you to get him the help that he needs." And that is when I saw the blessing because she didn't have to do that, but she did. And so I remember walking out of the school and I broke down. And then I got a call from a dear friend of mine. And when she was talking, I wasn't my bubbly self that I always am. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And when she said that, I broke and I just started crying. And my inner self got mad because I'm like, I did it again, right? And I just started crying. And she began to encourage me and she began to tell me about her youngest daughter. And one of the things she said was, we as mothers, we have to stick together. A lot of people don't really know what we go through because we're bosses, we're entrepreneurs, all of those things. And she was right. I'm a full-time entrepreneur, you know, trying to do my best as a mother and a provider. And now that my son's father is deceased, it's like, God, I need your help more than ever now, right? And so her words was so encouraging, and I was just so grateful to God for that moment. Like He knew who I needed in that hour, and for her to call me the minute I walked out of that door, I saw God. Sometimes we have to really look for God because God is around us. He's all around us, but we have to take out the time to really look for God. Okay, we have to look for God. And so I ended up, you know, taking him out, right, of the school. And I would call around to different daycares and stuff like that. And guess what? They were all booked. There was no room. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? I know that he needs to be around, um, people, children, so that we can get him to talking and all these things. And during that time, I had went into my brick and mortar um, with my company. And shortly after that, I was in the living room at my house And I was walking back and forth, tears rolling down my face. And I was like, God, I need your help. Sometimes we just got to say, God, I need your help. I want you to say it right now. God, I need your help. Sometimes that's all we have to say is, God, I need your help. Because what happens is when we say, God, I need your help, I believe that God hears us. Okay. And so I'm going back and forth. I'm just like, God, I need your help. I don't know what to do because sometimes we don't know what to do. If we've never been in a situation, we have no idea what we're doing. And that's how I felt. I don't know what to do. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm trying. And I don't want to give up. I don't want to throw in the towel, but God, I need your help. And while I'm pacing the floor, the Spirit of the Lord speaks to me and say, do you remember when you were in college and you went to this daycare and you would motivate the staff? Find that daycare. Now that daycare was in another city. That city is about 20, 30 minutes away from us. And so I couldn't remember the name of it. And so I just started Googling, looking up. And the one that stood out the most to me is the one that I called. And so I ended up calling it, and it was right. They had told me the owner was not in. She was at her other daycare. And I asked them, what is her name? Because I couldn't remember her name. And so I called the other daycare, said her name, and I began to talk. And I was like, I don't know if you remember me. And she said, no, I remember you. I remember you. And I began to tell her that I'm looking to put both of my sons into daycare and preschool. All the daycares here in our city are full. And she said to me, because of what you did when you were younger, I'm going to allow you to bring both of your boys, but I'm only going to charge you for one. Oh, somebody say favor. That was truly a blessing. I was grateful for that moment because, to be honest, I wasn't looking at the money. In my mind, I just need my boys to be in a daycare. I need my firstborn to be around kids. Okay. I don't care about the cost. I'll figure that out later. That was my mindset. Because sometimes, y'all, we will sit there and care about the money, not and forget that God is resourceful. Okay. And God is looking for those that will really walk by faith and not by sight, right? Lean not to your own understanding. That's what God is looking for. And so we got in there. I would drive every morning because they had to be there before 9 o'clock in the morning. I would drive there every morning, about 30 minutes away. I would pick them up. Now, at this time, I had just went into my brick and mortar. And then shortly after that, it was like shortly after that, maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I get a call from when the lady at the private school sent out the referrals. And they asked me and my son to come to the meeting. So we went, and they looked at me, they evaluated him. All right. When they evaluated him, they said, your son cannot talk. You need to diagnose your son as autistic. Tears rolling down my face. I just cannot help those tears, y'all. Rolling down my face. And this is when I felt tested in my faith because I'm sitting around 5 to 6 experts. And I am a person in my business that say the expert know what they're doing. Okay. Let the expert be the expert. I say that in my business. And in that moment, I was like, I'm either going to let them determine what happens to my son or I'm going to give it over to God. And so I said to them, I can't do that. I can't diagnose my son as autistic. I'm a person of faith, tears rolling down my face. I'm a person of faith, and I can't do that. I've seen God do too much. I've seen God heal people, and I can't settle for that. And the lady that was sitting in front of me looked at me and said, we're going to give him until he's 9 years old. At 9 years old, you're going to have to diagnose him or he's going to have to get out of the public school system. Okay. They told me about the program and they said, we see that he's in a daycare that's in another city. Do you want to take him out of that? this program is going to have him going to school Monday through Thursday at 12:30 p.m. And I looked at them and I said, no, I want him to stay in that and he will be in the program. I will make sure that he's there on time. And I did that for entire semester from about January to May. I did that. I got in my car in the morning, dropped him off in another city that was 30 minutes away. I drove another 30 minutes, about 20 minutes, drove to my office. I worked. At 11:30, I was back in my car, drove back to that city. Then I turned around, drove back to the city we live in, dropped him off. I would come back to work at 4:30, 4 o'clock. I was back in my car going to get my youngest son from that daycare. I was on the road for 3 hours every day, Monday through Thursday, because I was determined to help my son defeat autism. And at 4 years old, my son finally said, Mommy. Until this day, while I'm doing this recording, my son is 7 years old. And every time my son says, Mommy, my heart drops. Because I did not realize that my son was not calling me Mommy until the day he called me Mommy. It didn't even cross my mind. I didn't even think nothing of it until he was 4 years old and he called me Mommy. I want to encourage you out there. Don't lose faith in God. Trust God. It's worth it. Make sure you take it one day at a time. I cannot wait to continue to tell you the rest of this story. Because when I tell you my son is a product of how God moves, my son is an example that if you trust God and you put in the work and you have faith, you will see the hand of God move. I want to encourage you out there that are parents and you're saying to yourself, I want to give up. Do not give up. Do not throw in the towel. Continue to be your child's hero. They're looking up to you. If nobody else believes, you continue to believe. And you put in your mind, you're going to give it everything you've got. One day at a time, you're going to give it everything you've got. And whatever happens, you'll always be able to say, you gave it everything you got.